I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today, the Gumbaynggirr people, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. And I'd also just like to say thank you to everybody that's come here today. I think housing affordability, as Karen spoke about, is such an overwhelming issue sometimes, so big and so nationwide, that sometimes we sort of forget what we can be doing at a local level, and that it's really exciting to see everybody here today willing to work at the local level at this issue. So this is just an overview of what I'll be speaking about. I will be running through my presentation quite quickly, but all the information that I provide today, statistics, more statistics, death by statistics, will be available in a discussion paper that the Bellingen Shire Council is releasing. We are embarking on a review of our growth management strategy, and we're releasing a discussion paper which is asking people how they want to grow into the future. So all this information and more will be available there. That will be released next week, and I'll speak a bit about that. So I'll speak a bit about where we've been before. I think it's really important that when you're planning for the future, that you understand what's happened in the past. I'll speak about some of the population and housing trends that are occurring locally, mostly relating to Bellingen Shire, but I've been speaking to colleagues in Nambucca, and I have a few key statistics from there as well. Very similar in lots of ways, but different in others. And then I will be speaking about how you can get involved in helping us to review our growth management strategy. Our last growth management strategy was done in 2007. I'll be talking about what the growth management strategy is, and how it can impact on affordable housing, and how we use growth management strategies, and be speaking about how you can get involved, because we really do want a lot of community input into this strategy. So I'll speak briefly about the recent past of Bellingen, and by recent I mean sort of 60s onwards. Obviously dairy farming, very major industry in Bellingen in the past but also currently. There was a crash in the 60s in the dairy farming industry, and the Australia Paper Company came in and bought up a lot of ex-dairy farming land, planted a lot of timber, and the timber industry was revitalised from that point. Lots of people working in the sawmills, in the forestry industry. Subsequent to that, in the 70s and 80s, there was a sort of mass migration of people to the north coast looking for an alternative lifestyle, an eco-conscious lifestyle, and Bellingen, like other places, Lismore, Byron, Nimbin, places like that, experienced a population boom of people looking for this type of lifestyle. And that's evident in our character today and makes us really special. But it also did bring a lot of change, and the scale of that change is just illustrated in this graph. So this graph does show growth in population between census periods from the 60s to the present time. You can see the huge spike in the blue line. That's the change in the number of people. So you can see that in the 70s and 80s, there really was a population boom. We did receive a lot of people coming into the Shire. And then you can see that housing also picked up in terms of the number of houses that were built. And just relative to the situation that we face today, which in the last couple of census periods you see growth, but at a much lower level, I suppose. In housing, our supply is being squeezed, and also in the number of people that are coming here. So not too long ago, there was a very big change in our population in Bellingen, and some people may remember that. This slide just illustrates the change, I suppose, the difference between now and then. So between 76 and 86, in those 10 years, almost 3,000 people moved to the Shire, and that correlated with over 1,500 dwellings being built. In the last 10 years, so the census periods 2006 to 2016, we had a net population growth of 250 people, and 318 houses being built. So that in the last census period, that's about 151 extra people, and that relates to a growth rate of 1.2% for the Bellingen Shire. Our neighbours in Nambucca grew by 568 people, and that correlated to 3% growth. These figures are based on usual residence data as well. So over the last few decades, our population and the makeup of our population has changed a lot. It probably won't surprise anybody, but but we do have an ageing population. In the Shire, 1 in 4 people, in the Bellingen Shire, 1 in 4 people will be aged over 65. So that's a quarter of our population. In 1996, that proportion was 16%. So we're getting a greater proportion of people that are older. Our median age is 49, and the median age is the midpoint of the population. So that means half the population is older than 49, and half the population is younger. There's variations between the Shire. So in Dorrigo and Urunga, there's 55 and 54 in the median age, respectively. Bellingen suburb, these are based on the suburb areas. Bellingen suburb is quite interesting because it's got a slightly younger age profile, and the median age there is 44. The median age for regional New South Wales is 43. So overall, our Shire has an older population profile than the rest of the regional New South Wales. Nambucca's median age is 51. And what this is telling us is that this area, as we know, is a popular retirement destination, and that's what the statistics are showing. But as well as an ageing population, we have fewer children. 20 years ago, so in 1996, the most populous age group, so the largest amount of people in the Shire were aged 5 to 9 years old. So there was a lot of children. And then our population's been completely restructured. So now there are less and less children in the Shire. There are less being born and there are less staying and moving here. The implications of this, if this trend continues, and that's only if, population changes all the time and is very dynamic, so that doesn't mean it could continue, but the implications of this could be things like schools and just diversity in the population. Just a few migration trends. The people that leave the Shire, in terms of age groups, 18 to 24-year-olds, this isn't surprising. Most younger people are mobile. It's the most mobile age group. They want to leave for study, for entertainment, for travel. They are also potentially leaving the Shire, though, for affordable housing, because we know that younger people, it's harder for them to afford rentals and housing, and there may not be the housing stock that suits their needs. But an interesting emerging trend is that in the Bellingen area, in and around the valley, close to the valley, we're actually seeing, for the first time in a little while, younger people moving back and moving into the area. There was a slight increase in 2011 to 2016 of people aged 25 to 34. I'm one of those, I'm in that age group. I moved to Bellingen. I think it's got a real buzz about it, and yeah, it's attracting that group in again. And interesting in the context of fewer children, what does that mean into the future if those people are coming in? It is at the moment a phenomenon that seems to be restricted geographically. We're not seeing that kind of movement in the seaboard or the plateau. That doesn't mean it won't occur. Most growth in our Shire is driven by the over 55 age group. So they're coming for the lifestyle, to retire, but also interestingly, because relative to some of the areas that they're coming from, we actually offer more affordable housing than a lot of North Sydney or Sydney, so they can sell their home and then come here. The question that we're asking as part of the review of our growth management strategy is the housing that we've got meeting our needs? And we have many needs, many complex needs. And if our population's changed so much in 20 years, our housing really hasn't. And what does that mean? And what's coming online and what's being built, what's new? And what should we be doing in that sphere? Are we providing enough housing choice for the different age groups and maybe people we want to attract? And people of all income levels as well. I'll speak about that shortly. This is just another statistic that illustrates that our population's changed a lot. Couples without children is now our largest household type. 20 years ago it was couples with children. Another really interesting statistic is that the number of people living alone in the Shire has grown. It's now 27%, so that's a lot of people. And they're primarily people that are older as well. So we need to be thinking about what services that we need to provide. This is a statistic about how many, the housing makeup. It's based on the Bureau of Statistics data that we have, so it's quite crude, but it tells us that most of our housing is 3-bedroom homes. That's probably a historical situation. The next largest group are 4-bedroom homes. We have relatively little stock of 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom homes. And the greatest change over the last 10 years is that we've gotten more 4-bedroom houses relative to any other sort of housing type. And when we think about there's more people living alone, and we have little housing that's less than 3 bedrooms, it's just interesting. These are some local statistics on homelessness. They are based on the Australian Bureau of Statistics census estimates. They are most certainly an undercount. The ABS are getting better at collecting statistics about people who are experiencing homelessness, but they're by no means perfect. And I guess the wider trend is that, as Karen said, homelessness is on the rise, and that's played out locally. It doesn't just mean people sleeping rough. If you look at Armidale statistics, it could be students and overcrowding in university accommodation and things like that. And if you were experiencing homelessness, you're more likely to be, you may want to move to larger regional centres where there are more services. So that's why Coffs Harbour and Armidale have larger numbers potentially. So we have already spoken about that you're in housing stress if you're spending more than 30% of your weekly income on housing costs. In the Bellingen Shire and the Nambucca Shire, historically we have more lower income groups in our population. So our population is skewed towards people earning lower incomes and always has been. And that's what this graph shows, that to the left, we have a higher proportion of people on lower and lower middle incomes than regional New South Wales. But then really interestingly, the change in household groups over the last census period tells us that the greatest change is in the lower income groups. More people in the lower and lower middle income groups are leaving the Shire. And I don't think that's because they're suddenly earning a lot more money. There's not really a catalyst that suggests that. They probably just can't afford housing and are having to move away. So it's a really powerful statistic. We've spoken a bit about the median house price, or that was mentioned in the movies. It's over $500,000 now to buy a house in the Shire. 5 years ago, it was about $390,000 was the median house price. The number of affordable rental homes available to people on low incomes in this area is dwindling. These statistics this graph only shows to 2013 because they're based on Family and Community Services data, but we can safely assume that it's just, that it hasn't gotten better. There's not the rental stock there for people in this income group. 90% of very low income earners are in housing stress. So that means if you're on government income support or even earning the minimum wage and you're a single person, you're very, very unlikely to be able to find secure housing in the Shire. So this brings me to, well, what are some of the things that we can do about that? We know that we've changed in the past. There may be change coming. How do we influence that? How do we evolve? How do we respond to these challenges? And I've already mentioned the ageing population. I think this idea of climate change and mitigation and adaptation, are our homes meeting our needs? I know that moving here and living in Bellingen, I wasn't prepared for the heat wave this summer. I struggled through many nights. So I think that we really need to be thinking about the housing that we're providing. Make sure that it's healthy and it's designed well. And just because housing's affordable doesn't mean that we should be compromising on design either. And changing technology is another big one. I think in a way that's also an opportunity. We know that people in Dorrigo, for example, I think over 10% of the population work from home. So there is emerging opportunities as well that we can respond to. So a growth management strategy will help us prepare for change. A growth management strategy is written at a local level. It sits underneath the North Coast Regional Plan, which is a state government document, and they need to talk to each other. But basically, it's probably the most important strategic planning document for our local area because it guides growth over the next 20 years and it guides planning decisions. It will prioritise where and how we grow. And that's why it's really important that we get community input into this process because we want to know, where do people see Bellingen Shire in 20, 30 years' time? What sort of growth should we aspire to? What should we target? Should we be providing more homes for lower income earners, lower and middle income earners? And how do we do that? What changes do we need to make? And what compromises can we make or what can we add? This is a brief slide about just trying to explain how council would use a growth management strategy. And basically, if there's an idea or an action that's prescribed in the growth management strategy, or somebody comes to us with a proposal at the strategic planning level, we would look at what the growth management strategy says. And then if the proposal is broadly consistent with what the strategy says, and the strategy's been devised with input from the community, then there's a streamlined pathway to, support, and council would be looking more to facilitate these kind of things because they're consistent with the strategy. So that's the tick pathway. If it's not clear that something's consistent with the strategy, then you start getting sort of a longer process, and we'll ask for more information. This is sort of that question mark pathway is what exists when there's not a clear strategy as well, which means everything goes a bit slower. And then finally, a growth management strategy can really set out, if we receive something and then upon looking at it, it's not consistent, it's clearly not consistent with the growth management strategy. It may not, have community benefits into the long term, it may not be in our community's interests. Then that's a mechanism to say, well, it's not consistent with the strategy, you have to review that, we would reject that. So it can be a powerful tool, and getting people on board to decide on what the strategic priorities should be is really important. And we are going through this process now. We're beginning it. We're releasing a discussion paper as of next week. We will be out and about in the community, so there will be lots of opportunities to talk to council. We're planning a few activities. It will be advertised in the newspaper next week, and there will be many opportunities to tell us how you think we should prioritise planning in the future. These are the ways. It'll be available on our website. You can call us, and it will be advertised in the local media as well. And we're looking at speaking to people over a period of 3 months about what they want to see. If as part of this forum that there are solutions that people are really wedded to, probably a good idea to let us know, come speak to us, because like I said, the growth management strategy, if you can find the tick pathway, that's probably the best way to make something happen if it needs approvals or needs, a planning permissions type framework. I'll just finish on a slide which offers a couple of quotes. I don't know if people can read them, so I'll find them and read them. But basically, in the past, growth management strategies have tended just to rezone land and bring about extra housing supply. They haven't really sought to target particular groups or particular issues, or if they have, it hasn't been clear as to how to achieve those principles. So we're asking the community, what should we be prioritising? What should we focus on? And the reason why is sort of comes out in a couple of these quotes. One of them is, you need a variation of the demographics. So you've got elderly, you've got the young, the adolescents, to actually make a proper community. And we know we value a diverse community here. But when we look at our age profile, it's changing. And also, it is in everybody's long-term economic interest to provide shelter for people that cannot afford market housing. It will cost us, as taxpayers, too much in the long term if we don't. And that comes from the Australian Financial Review about the importance of social housing. And yeah, just reiterates everything I think that we've heard today. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.